Hello, and welcome to Speaking Out, the latest news decoder dialogue, where we bring experts and young people together around the same virtual table to tackle big topics. And today we're going to discuss a lot of them. We live in a world full of big, urgent problems, from climate change and conflict to misinformation and polarization. And it can be really easy to feel overwhelmed or paralyzed, and to think that as a young person, there's nothing you can do. But across the globe, young people are proving otherwise. From Nepal to Bangladesh, Morocco to Peru, youth are taking action, speaking out, and making change happen at all levels. And at News Decoder, we aim to give young people the skills and the platform to do just that, to ask questions, to be heard, and to shape the world around them. So today, we're going to hear directly from young people across our global network, sharing their ideas and experiences in conversation with News Dakota correspondent and our editor. This talk is being recorded and will be available as a video and podcast on our website and socials in the next few days. For those in our live audience, please drop any questions into the Q&A. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Maria Krasinski, the managing director here at News Decoder. We're a nonprofit organization based in Paris, France. And now I will turn things over to our moderator, News Decoder's educational news director, Marcy Burstener.
Hi, I'm Marcy Burstener. Can everyone see me? Does it work? Okay. I'm Marcy Burstener. I'm the educational news director at News Decoder. In my capacity, I work with two sets of people. I work with the students in our schools that are exploring topics and writing stories and doing podcasts. And I work with our professional correspondents who do stories for us as well, with the aim of bringing out global perspectives and talking about stories and bringing on voices that aren't really heard. And being heard is the topic today. And so I'm just going to introduce I'm just going to tell you who our panelists are first, and then I'm just going to go straight into questions and you can meet them that way. So today we have five students from three continents. We have Ramona, who's from Tanzania. She's studying at the African Leadership Academy in South Africa. We have Anna, who's from Uganda, who's also with the African Leadership Academy. We have Sophie and Sydney, who are both from the Hewitt School in New York. And we have Mahi, who attends the Vibgyor High in Kolhapur, India. For our experts, we have Marwan El Bahrawi, who's a research intern at the Carter Center, who came out of our News Decoder program, and Alfonso Silva Santisteban, who's a reporter in Peru, who's covered stories about the underreported communities of LGBTQ and indigenous communities. So first, I'm going to go straight into questions. And the first question I'm going to put to our youth panelists, and it's this foundational question. Do you feel like you are listened to? So first, Ramona, do you feel like you're listened to? Do we have Ramona with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry. That's a great question. So, do I feel like I'm being heard? I think it's kind of like 50-50. So it's like sometimes yes, sometimes no. And I feel like it really depends with who you're talking to, honestly. Because if I'm talking to, let's say I'm talking about a certain topic to my peers and they already have that knowledge already, they already know what I'm talking about, then it's much easier for them to actually hear me and understand me. Because I guess when we're talking about heard, we mean like actually understand what you're trying to say. Yeah. But if we're talking about, like, say, maybe much very younger people or older people who don't really get what you're trying to say, then I guess it is easy to feel unheard.
Okay. What about you, Anna?
It's very similar to what she said. It depends on who you're speaking to. You could be speaking to open-minded people who are willing to listen and understand what you're trying to say, where you're coming from, or you could be listening to closed-minded people who don't want to hear what you have to say. So yes, it's 50-50.
Okay. And how about you, Sophie?
I would say the question whether I'm listened to, I think it depends on what's the context. If it's my peers, I would think that I am listened to. However, it's other adults in my community, such as teachers, family members, I would say that I'm heard and listened to, but not equally valued. I would say at times my opinions are not valued as the same as other adults. And ultimately, there's this sense of I'm a student, I'm a child, so therefore my opinions must be not as valued as other adults in my community.
Okay. And Sydney, do you feel the same way or different?
I agree with Sophie, and I think building off of that, like as she said, it like depends on like the space you're in and like who you're surrounded by. I think especially as like teenage girls, that contributes to it a lot. I think people can undermine our opinions or like statements and beliefs that we have just like as teenage girls in society. So I think that that's another factor that goes into whether I feel listened or heard.
Okay. How about you, Mahi, over in India?
I agree with all the four opinions kept forward. And what I see here is people look at the age and not the experience. I may have experienced a bit different from what people have experienced around me, but they are more into this prejudice that, oh my God, she's so young, what she has to say. She has just experienced less life than we have. So let's not listen to her. Or maybe few people who actually want to listen, or they do not have this prejudice that may it be young, may it be elder. The person who is talking, we should listen to them. We should respect what they're saying. So yes, I feel that matters here a lot.
It does seem that these things are in some part age related. I remember even years ago when I was quite young, when I was in university, I remember saying to someone once that I was going to write my memoirs. And this person said to me, "You haven't done anything." And I thought, wow, talk about negating 22 years of existence. I'm going to Marwan. This idea of generational, of old versus young. We hear a lot about Gen Z, and you've been looking into Gen Z quite a lot. So, first of all, is there such a thing as a Gen Z movement? And doesn't that kind of fly in the face of the idea that many people have of youth apathy?
Yeah, I think just to continue on what was mentioned earlier, what makes these Gen Z movements or Gen Z groups or political uprisings in different countries, what makes them special or different from other social political movements is that, first the name in Gen Z, like there is already this a lot of literature on categorization of generations, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, baby boomers, and all that stuff. And it's useful for, political and sociological studies to have those categories and understand, like collective political and psychological and socio-political behavior of a specific category. But when we're talking about these Gen Z movements today, we're looking at specifically um, a stance that these young people are taking, which is a stance that's accusatory or accusing of generations that came before them. It is a stance that tells us that, Gen Z is the first generation to become conscious of all these issues and the first generation to act on those issues, and blames the previous generations on not doing anything. So I think that's like the very first thing when it comes to mind when we're talking about just the title of the movement, Gen Z. To answer your question whether it's a movement or not, it gets tricky because it's not like other previous political uprisings or social movement that happened before. Like for example, previously, like the Arab Spring, even if it was mainly based on the digital world, a lot of protesters and activists hailed from political parties. They're, like youth wings. They hail from civil society organizations. They come from different, NGOs and human rights organizations, and then they went to the street based on their, political experience with those entities. The difference with this Gen Z movement is that it's completely different. These are people who are just connected online, people who just shared a post, people who saw a hashtag and then shared it with each other. And then suddenly you got tens of thousands of people connected to the same server and sharing all their experiences with unemployment, nepotism, and all this corruption, all these problems that they are facing in their societies. So yeah, to briefly answer your question, it is a movement, but it's not like the classical definition of a movement. It doesn't have a leader. Most of these Gen Z movements in different countries, they don't have a leader, they're leaderless. They also don't have a specific set of demands. They have a long list of, we want to do this, we want to end corruption, we want to do that, we want to do this. And then you go to another group within the Gen Z movement. For example, in Nepal, there are different Gen Z groups, not just one. So that's why I'm finding it a little bit hard or difficult to answer your question, is that yes, there is an actual concrete movement in the street, people are protesting, but is it like something that we can put in a box and be like, okay, this is, like the Arab Spring, or like this is like some type of, student protests in Serbia. We can't do this. We can't do this with the Gen Z movement.
So now I'm going to go to Alfonso then. Well, first, Marwan, do you see this happening worldwide?
Yes, I mean, so far it's happening, I think, in 7 countries where there is like actual Gen Z movements doing actions there in the street. Did it lead to the same consequences in those different countries? No, completely different. Some protests led to the dissolution of the House of Representatives. Some protests led to the ousting of the president or the head of state. Other protests led only to the government removing a financial bill, such as the case in Kenya. There was a tax bill, and then Gen Z protests went to the street, and the government just removed that bill instead of like removing the whole government or like the whole parliament. So yeah, they have taken different forms and different consequences in the different contexts where they emerged.
Okay, so following on that, Alfonso, do you see this happening in Peru and in the countries around you? Because you're in a completely different region of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I got commissioned to do a story on the Gen Z movement in Peru for a Uruguayan magazine, because there was and I mean, the tricky part was Peru is in a political crisis for many years. And at the same time, one of the things that I try to show on the story is like every once in a while, even when I was what would be now Gen Z, like there's an outburst of outrage, and young people are called to be responsible of the change. Like they are the spearheads of the protest, and at some point they become responsible of the change. But then the conditions are the same, especially in a country where Peru, we're having a political crisis, a lot of conditions for unemployment, for studying. And then these young people that are in the streets receive the violence, receive the stigmatization, receive the signaling that they are not organized, that they are not doing what people that should be making the conditions for them to exercise their citizenship and come into the world and develop their lives. They are signaling for basically not doing what the other people should be done, and the cycle kind of repeats. So here, for example, in Peru, there was a specific norm that the government tried to make around pensions that affected young people, and that moved some people to the streets. And media was the one that related to Nepal and started saying, oh, Gen Z is here too. Some of the kids took the one-piece flag, but the majority of people that were coming out were, for example, university students. So one of the not so young person now that was assessing that says like, these are kids, yes, but these are kids that are part of the country and are reading the whole reality of the country and are also citizens of the country. Like, it's a mistake sometimes to signal everything and reduce it to a generational, to an age thing, like as if the protest of young people that are saying, I'm sick of politicians, I'm sick of the insecurity crisis, I'm talking about Peru, right? I'm sick about the non-representation, as if it was a demand of people on an age range. And they even say it, right? Like the ones that are, like, for example, the ones that are doing political organization at their universities, yeah, they are young, they acknowledge themselves as young, but they're not necessarily identified with the idea of Gen Z as a sort of pop movement that is spread across the media, that sometimes is hard to contextualize and to land it or ground it to specific realities, right? So I think we're living in times where everybody is kind of like anxious, or the future doesn't paint itself as promising. And I think young people are carrying that burden and do have something to say. But I think it's also a mistake sometimes to try to homogenize an entire generation across the globe, homogenize realities, and not showing that it's our young people that are starting to come of age and to start to study and to start to come into the world, and are being frustrated because of the same realities that I faced in my middle age, like, so I would say that there is a movement, but it's driven by the crisis that is affecting everybody.
Okay. Okay, so we do so I see a theme happening where there seems to be this division, again, an age-related division of young people feeling they're not being heard, unless they're speaking to each other, and this problem in the media of using that age to dismiss. And so I'm going to go back to our student panelists, and this time I'm going to start with Sophie. So if you get a sense that when you talk to your peers, they understand where you're coming from, but when you're talking to many adults, they don't, and you don't get heard or understood in the same way. How do you combat that? How can we, if what Alfonso's saying is really we have to start looking at problems and finding solutions together, and it should not be generational. How do you get the respect you need from adults so that you can bridge that gap?
That's a good question, Mercy. I think in order to make sure I'm valued as much when I do come in contact into moments where I think adults are kind of mitigating what I'm saying, I think the only choice I have is to just keep speaking. I think it's so easy to, when like faced in moments where you feel silenced, to kind of like give into that pressure and kind of let yourself dim what you were saying. But I think it's really important. What I find myself doing is continue to voice my opinions and let the adults know in the room that like I believe that what I have to say is on par with what they have to say. So therefore it should be equally valued.
Okay. And Sydney, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I agree with Sophie. I mean, I'm one of those people that like she described where when it's like easier to just like give in and like let the case rest. Like sometimes I have issues with that, and I recognize that maybe the person on the opposite side just isn't going to understand me, or like maybe we're just never going to compromise or like find a middle ground. But I think in the instances where I truly want to understand where other people are coming from so that they can respect my opinion and input, I not like push back in like a argument or an argumentative sense, but like push back as in like I just want them to hear me out, kind of, if that makes sense.
It does. Okay. I'm going to go to Mahi now. So one of the things I'm wondering as I'm listening to you guys is whether the problem might not be so much older versus young, but the fact that many of us now, we tend to hang out and communicate with people who we know already kind of understand us and feel the same way we do. And it's when we are trying to talk to people with different opinions that everything gets intractable. And so, Mari, have you been in conversations with people where you've been able to bridge that? First of all, do you find that, or am I seeing things the wrong way? Is it do you find it easy or difficult to talk to people who are coming from a different position than you are?
For this question, I may give like two answers. Firstly, the people who know me, they know when I speak, they have to listen to me because I give the same respect when they speak to. So basically, when I open, I try to open or give my opinions where I'm listened or when I'm heard, or like when I'm heard. or else I feel it's just in vain to talk in front of people who just do not want to listen to you. It's just talk and leave. There's no heartfelt feelings that I've like bridged to, because it's pretty normal here that we have this gap that it's you are the elder one. I should respect you and blindly respect you. And I don't have any voice in front of you because all you say is white and truth. But I'm trying, even in my family, I'm trying to keep my opinions and like as we all know, charity begins at home. So I'm trying to change this here. Even if I'm small or even if I'm young, I'm equally given the right to speak on each and every problem, even if it's not mine. But I consider the people of the same bloodline, so I'll think the best for you. And about the society, I'm not that social, but to my friends, of course, I look the best for them. So bridging the gap, it has been difficult in the society, which is not yet progressive here, but yes.
Okay. Now, Ramona, do you find that you end up having conversations mostly with people that who already understand you, and is it difficult to converse at least with people who come from a different position?
Okay, thank you. So, actually, it is much simpler to, like, it's much easier, and I would say it's like a comfort zone to talk about something with people that you're sure that will understand you and will like hear you out the way that you want to. But then I feel like from my context, how I think about it is that I kind of have to talk to the people who don't know about what I'm trying to say, because that's kind of like the target audience that I'm trying to reach out to. Yeah. So when I find myself in that situation, I just try to put myself in their shoes, and I try to I try to just be curious about what position they're coming from, and that so that I can explain it in a way that would not be offensive. That's one thing. And just to keep the conversation like get very interactive and like simple and not offensive to anyone, so they can just be easier. Yeah.
Okay. Anna, do you feel the same way?
Yes, in terms of conversations with people who may not share the same views or understanding as you, it's in order for you to have a for the conversation to go somewhere and for both parties to learn something and to get something out of the conversation. I think it's about understanding each other and where you're coming from. And most of the time, we find comfort in talking to those who understand what we're trying to convey, the message we're trying to say. Whereas, like Ramona said, in this context, in order for us to get the message to people, you need to talk to people who may not understand what you're trying to. You have to talk to people who have different views, and by I think also allowing to hear where other people are coming from allows you to understand and maybe just help understand how you can shift that person's perspective and understand where both parties are coming from, because you could learn something from them and you could be like, oh, okay, so maybe this person has something that had never thought of, and so that allows you guys to we both gain something out of the conversation. Yeah.
So now we've been talking about kind of conversations, but in terms of getting yourself heard on a larger scale, have you ever been angry or frustrated enough with something that you took some kind of political action? Have you signed petitions or joined demonstrations, or I don't know what you might do to get your voices heard on a larger scale?
Oh, do we answer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No, I'm staying on with you guys right now.
Okay. So, something that has made me want to take action. I would say from my context, where I come from, in Tanzania, these disorders like autism and that kind of thing. It's not really like most people don't have awareness on it. And it's like when a child is, let's say, born with autism, they're usually taken as like, let's say it's a curse or that maybe the parents sinned and that's why the child is that kind of way. And it's mostly just because of ignorance, because most of them, like most of the people don't know about autism. So yeah, I've had cousins who've like been born with autism, like three of them, I think. And yeah, I've just like seen how they're treated, and that really hurt me. Yeah. So obviously I didn't do like a who movement, but I did like a social media awareness campaign. So we were just like posting like facts about autism and like what it actually is and trying to educate the people. And that I think it really helped because we got a chance to like go on national TV and we went on radios and we talked about autism and that kind of thing. And yeah, it kind of helped to like reduce the like the ignorance a little bit. Yeah. But then
Oh,
that's
wow.
yeah. But then that's not for like everyone. Yeah, because some people obviously didn't take the message well because it's already part of their culture that they know that, oh, this is a curse. So like you coming and telling them that, oh, this is a normal thing and it's just like it's a normal thing and that you should just treat them as actual people. They kind of didn't take it very well. Yeah. So
Well, well, but your social media campaign got you the ability to go on radio.
yeah, radio and national TV.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Um, so Anna, how about you? Have you felt frustrated or angry enough about something that you decided to take political action?
I think, okay, in Uganda, taking political action is something that it's a very risky um thing to do because in most young youth in Uganda, if they have an issue that they're trying to address, that people don't typically have awareness of, or they're trying to solve an issue that people that seems, for example, young girls not going to school, being taken into early marriages. If you go and you vocally express that to in terms of taking political action, you will it's very scary, I would say. And so it's not, so I normally start small. So I started with like just going around areas, posters, functions, webinars, just allowing people to hear slowly because Ugandans are very traditional in the sense that you can't exactly as a young girl, I can't exactly vocally express how the issues surrounding young girls. And
Uh-huh.
therefore, if me speaking already is looked down upon, and so already just doing the little things such as um, just going around spreading awareness to people is already it's already looked down upon. So taking political action is something that I'd have to it's a really big step. And so that's something that I haven't exactly done. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, definitely. It's already for many people just speaking out, even to their own people, even to their families, takes quite a lot of courage. But to do so in an environment where you are going to have repercussions is definitely something to think about. Although nowadays, it seems to me, I'm I'm much older than you guys, and I'm thinking that if I were 17 or if I were 20 or if I were 24, um, just the idea of getting trolled online, wherever you are in the world, seems to me a really scary thing. That it's almost as if the ability to get heard has gone global through the internet, but the ability of people who don't want to hear you to attack you has also gone global. So it seems like a scary, for me, it seems like a scary thing all the way around. So now I am going to go to Sophie and Sydney, who are in a much different place, right, in New York, where I'm from New York, and I was just in New York, and I know people in New York always speak out. It's like it's in the culture to speak out. So have you guys been felt frustrated or angry enough about something to take real action?
I have been, I also think just coming from New York, like you said, people are very vocal and adamant about how they feel. Like, even just thinking off the top of my head, like watching videos a couple weeks ago from like ICE raids downtown, you see like everyday Samaritans like literally fighting with these officers. Like, I think in this city, like when people have an issue with what's going on around them, like they're very vocal about it, which is something that I admire. Um, and so to your question, I am like a photographer, so personally use like my art and the images that I take to kind of convey a story and a narrative. But besides myself, there's like one project I can think of in particular that my friend did where she was documenting specifically like Mexican American families in New York City who immigrated here, and she basically documented them undocumented at protests, and like it was a super like vulnerable project with like kids and like elderly, but I think like through art is where I kind of express myself, not so much like, I don't know how to explain it, like it's more of like a creative but powerful like.
Okay, and Cindy?
I agree with Sydney, and I think that in New York City, like we're so lucky that our culture is about being vocal. I originally grew up in Switzerland, and I think Switzerland's an environment where I was used to everything being very like uniformed, and I think that we're not as outspoken as a culture. I think we're quite a reserved people. But what's so amazing about New York is we're able to be unapologetically like ourselves and hold value in our values as well. And so we're Sydney are both in our Latinx affinity space at our school, where we discuss about like what it means to be Hispanic in New York, especially in this like political climate. A way I found myself when I found myself angry at ICE raids, and I felt as if immigrants weren't being treated with dignity, not being like read their Miranda rights, all these different issues that played a role into their treatment. I was able to channel how Sydney channeled her passion like for art. I used my passion for technology. I'm an admin coder, and I was able to create almost like a sense of open AI, a large language model where like designated for immigrants to be able to chat in whatever language of their like home language and be able to ask questions and get their legal answering based off UCIS data, but like written in a way where they could understand, and it was not just a bunch of legal jargon that felt like unintelligible for them and something they weren't being able to process. And I think that's like an example of like in New York City, yes, we're so vocal about our political views, but we're also able to find our passions and our niches to channel our anger into something more productive.
Oh, wow, that sounds awesome. That sounds amazing. So I'm going to go to Mahi, and then we're going to go over to Alfonso, because I want to talk more about this idea of using art and photography. But Mahi, what about you in India? Do you feel that you've got the ability to make your voice heard on a larger level, or do you feel repressed?
It's more of the repressed part here because I don't know why the society feels that answering to their questions or making a counter question is more of a disrespect culturally. I don't know why is this prejudice pretty common here because even if I'm explaining something which is wrong to an elder person, he'll be like, "Oh, you don't have the legacy or you don't have the audacity to tell me what to do because obviously I'm elder." So even if it may be a smaller thing, even if it may be a political or a huge aspect, it's more difficult here to be, you know, to put your points in front and explain them what is right, what is wrong. Or here, what it matters is like respect to the elderly if you're like into culture. And basically, I'm in more of a cultured family, like who is very, very culturally active, and they are more of like, no, 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 it's disrespect. It's not, your voices are not going to be heard. It's more of a disrespect. But I make sure that if this is a disrespect, please give me the points or good reason. Why do you feel this is a disrespect? Is it my tone? Or is it like if I'm telling you, it's your mistake? Is that a disrespect? So I try my level best to explain them what my points are. May it be frustrating, may it be hurting, but my work is to tell them. So yeah, I try my level best to do that.
Have you ever felt frustrated or angry enough about something that you decided to try to take kind of a larger stance?
It's more of a shutdown system. If it's like more frustrating, it's better I just be in a room, calm myself down. It's okay, let's leave this page, unread for the further part. Let's move on to the next chapter because it may be more chaotic, it may not go into the harmony, but things can worsen out and I won't be able to handle them all alone. So for now, it's not on a huge aspect, but yeah, small steps and a larger step maybe someday.
Okay. Now we're going to go to Alfonso because Alfonso, you're a photographer, and in the world of journalism and the history of journalism, photography has taken a really important place in documenting and making change. Do you feel that you're doing that with your camera?
I don't know. Uh, I don't. I think I don't know. I mean, now images are all over, right? And it's very different when the break news stories were given by photographers that were accessing places that nobody else was, versus now when there's an issue and the images that you get are somebody took his phone or her phone and start documenting, and that's what the content is, right? So I was discussing that with some people like some weeks ago, and I think that the people that are exploring the language, that are doing photography, maybe like more more in depth, maybe their role is now to communicate different, right? To see, it's not just about the information or the break news, because that's already been covered by a lot of witnesses that have a device to generate image or video, but maybe about like kind of like what Maki was saying in the sense of like descent, for example. So images allow you to show something in a way that is less clear, but at the same time to interpret and to try to understand from different aspects, right? And from different points of views. So I think that's part of the role now. Because now the language is very like upfront of disagreement and the trolling and the everybody's kind of like shouting, right? With images, the interaction is different, and I think there's a role to try to communicate what you are seeing, but in a way that allows people to reflect, to look at something and maybe ask what is happening in the context, why is that as such, or what are they feeling, and from there maybe, because if you see an image and I feel sad and somebody else feels sad, because we're sharing that human aspect, even if we have completely different positions politically, right? So I think that's the potential there. um, I don't know if what I do will generate change in that sense, but I think I try to do that at least with the people I have around me, or the people that are looking at my work. But I think that's kind of like a motivation in a sense.
So the images can kind of connect us across divides because we actually see the same things.
Or not necessarily, but at least we don't have the tool to start this shouting back and forth and name and tagging. At least it's different. Like we're a little, we don't have that at hand. So I don't know, maybe it's useful in that sense.
Right. Marwan, so you've been looking at different countries where protests are taking place and where activism is taking place. And one of the things we've talked about here is that activism actually can take many different forms. I mean, activism can start with a conversation in your own home. It can start with photography or with something you create on the computer. What have you been seeing? Have you been seeing different kinds of activism?
Yeah, I think of course there is not like a uniform way to go about and be an activist or bring about change. I would say the most used method is protest in this Gen Z movement. Everyone goes out to the street to protest. There is, of course, people who are leading social media campaigns, where they're making, like social media content that are raising awareness about certain issues, political issues that people are demanding. There is also journalists, people who are writing articles or report on these issues. There is also, for example, the Gen Z movement in Morocco. So they started, I think the first week of October, that's when they had the first protest. And then the first day, there was a lot of arrests. Police was arresting a lot of young people. And that kind of like slowed down the pace. So not, a lot of people were more like intimidated and didn't want to go out to the street. And that's where everyone shifted completely to the Discord platform. And there was a server with over 250,000 participants. And all of these people are young people who are interested in knowing more about politics, not necessarily going out. So activism is not necessarily like, doing an action. It could be learning. I think learning is a very important aspect of activism, political activism specifically, because before you go out to the street to protest, the parliament or like the prime minister or the government or nepotism and corruption and stuff like that, you got to have at least a basic understanding of, what the parliament as an institution does, what the government does, what are elections for. And that's something that's actually seen in the example of Morocco. The same week when the protest started, the king of Morocco gave a speech. I think the protests were Monday, the speech was on Friday. And the speech was not like other countries where you have heads of state kind of calming down the protesters and being like, okay, we're going to respond to you or anything. No, the king simply reminded everyone of their responsibilities. First, the members of parliament for representing the people, and he reminded the citizens of doing their duty of voting. So I think that's also like another aspect of activism. If you are knowledgeable about what elections are, going out there to learn about the agendas of different political parties and knowing what to vote for or who to vote for, I think that's also an important aspect of that activism. But I just want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, Marcy. I think when you asked Ramon and Anna, you mentioned something that um, it's like in the lines of what kind of event made you like angry or like gave you so much anger so that pushed you to do a political action. And I think this anger is very important in this Gen Z movement that you are seeing, or this Gen Z protests, because people, like I said in the beginning, people are these protesters, like everything they know about the protests or the reason they're going out is solely based on social media and the stuff that they saw on social media. So you see this post about, like corruption, people repost it and stuff like that. And that's how people get, um, angry because they saw that, another citizen of, or like friend of theirs, or like somebody in their community was arrested by the police, or, something happened to them, they got a degree and they don't have a job. And I think just mentioning this, unemployment is one of the main conditions that led to this Gen Z protests. Just mentioning that. But when you're on social media and you get all these posts, and like the debate that's being forwarded here is a debate between good and bad, very like binary, like not a lot of nuances. Just, like the prime minister is bad, or the current government is good, or stuff like that. These type of discourse kind of plays on the emotional aspects of, the content consumer, like the people on the other side of the screen. And that's where the anger comes from, because there is a lot of emotions that are coming up when people are engaging with this type of content. And that anger is turned into a symbolic and political resource that people are using when they're going out to protest in the street. So far, I think I'm all agreeing with all of this. Where it gets problematic for me is where is this going to lead? You are angry, you're out in the street, you're protesting. Like, what are you gonna do about that? Like you're not gonna bring about change just by being out in the street. And like that's where I think like all that political education and like all that stuff comes in handy, because it allows people to have a clear agenda, to have a clear structure. And that's the main problem with these Gen Z movements, because they don't. People are just out in the street. And like Alfonso said earlier, Gen Z demands are everyone's demands. Everyone wants to end corruption. Everyone wants to end nepotism. Everyone wants to have, high prosperity and whatnot. But again, it goes back to that notion of, this Gen Z, are all, I think the term for it is digital natives, like we're born into the digital world. Like, like I think Generation Alpha is a little bit worse, they were born in AI and everything. Like we were still like born in, we're still getting used to internet and whatnot. But being born in this age and then having to deal with the emotional impact that this, political content that we see in social media, that's I think where it's leading to this like abrupt action, just going out to the street to protest and not, sitting down to really calculate what are we gonna do.
Okay. Yeah, this idea of constructive communication, constructive dialogue is really important, I think. And I'm going to go back to the students now, because one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about all that is how and whether this ties to elections. We just came off of a very important year for elections, and we're coming on to another very important year for elections around the world. Some of them could be earth-shaking. And I'm wondering, student panelists, do you see elections and voting as a way to get listened to get heard, or do you see them as useless? I'm gonna start with Mahi.
Okay, here political means they more affect here the employment and placements, because every political leader has its own point of views and own set of rules how things should go, and a different way of governing the government. But yeah, as a student, it's not a major role of government, because things are pretty set that education is not yet disturbed much. But yeah, 2 to 3 rules can be a thing, but not a major political effect or major political movement can be done on the education. But yes, I would say for the employment, how government is including technology and how much things are going on for that. So yeah.
Do you think that voting for you it will be an important thing?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Do you see that for you, that voting in an election will be important? Is that something that you take seriously?
Yes, voting here plays a very, very important role, because there was one year I still remember, like my parents said me that there was this era in a political time that where due to one vote, one single vote, the government had changed. So here one vote and equal value is given in our constitution and in the society, and there are campaigns and there are awareness camps that yes, voting is important, may it be the elder ones, may it be the younger ones, or may it be the first time voters. You should be like given equal opportunity to choose your own leader and whom you want to be governed. And yes, people and the young ones, as they turn like an adult, here the voting rights are on was like 18 years. So at that time, people get aware about the politics and what's going around the world. So, and whom should we give our vote? And does that vote, count as we want to be? Because that one year played a very important role in the political history of India, that due to a single vote, the governments had changed, the political parties have changed, and it was pretty interesting voting polls that time. So yes, voting is important, may it be the younger ones or the elder ones.
Okay. And And Anna and Ramona, where you are, do you and your peers feel that voting is a way to get heard?
In the context of Uganda, because they are upcoming elections, voting is it's just I think voting is not really a way to get heard because it's just another it's just a it's like another addition to say it doesn't really do much, and that's because voting just I think most okay in the context of young people, um we I'll give an example as to where my cousins when they vote they don't really they believe they vote with the intention of hoping that something good comes out of it and that their vote is and that they're being heard through it. But however, voting always leads to the same thing, the same president, the same corruption, um the same things that we're trying to fight against. And so therefore voting doesn't really um I would say voting doesn't really do any good in the sense of creating change because in terms of because right now, for example, the president, we're just gonna have the same president. We're gonna have the same corrupt government. So there's not really much voting can do, and there's not really much protesting we can do. The only way, I would say that voting doesn't really play a large role in changing or being heard in Uganda.
Okay, how about in Tanzania?
Okay, so in the context of Tanzania, so for us, I really do believe that for the youth, elections and voting really doesn't really matter that much. And I guess this doesn't really apply to Tanzania only. I guess it would be like as a continent in a way, because for us, like let's say in my country, voting is mostly for adults, and like anyone below 18 isn't allowed to vote. And so that like voting or elections, I feel like it's just a time for the adults to shine and to like share their views and everything. But for the youth, they like whatever you say, no one is really gonna care about it. It's like we don't really have a say in what government we're gonna get in that kind of way. Because even in the last elections, there were protests in my country, and all those protests were there were adults led like the people who led the protests were mostly adults in a way, and it also really didn't do anything. So yeah.
In some places around the world, in some cities in the United States, for instance, and I believe in actually maybe in Ireland where I am, in some elections, 16-year-olds can vote. Do you think that young people should be able to vote?
Do I think that yes, I actually do think that we should vote because there's some things that actually affect us directly. Okay, like let's say the Ministry of Education and that kind of thing. So I do think that we should have a say in who we get to be led by, because it's like yeah, I think because we're also citizens of the country in a way. So I do think that we should have a say and that they should like respect our decision. Yeah.
Okay. And over in New York, Sophie and Sydney, now you're again a completely different um, uh, a political atmosphere. Um, do you feel that voting is important and a way to get heard?
That's a good question. I would say it really depends. I think, well, number one, in the United States, we do in fact have our electoral college. So I think that in itself makes it so that you're not really getting heard as one would assume. But as well with the election, I mean, us in New York City, we recently had our mayoral election, and a lot of our community members were seniors in high school, our friends who just turned 18. This was their first time voting. And I think that for them, voting isn't necessarily an opportunity for you to be heard completely, because there are times where no candidate will ever be, or at least in this election, was like perfect. A lot of people would have bits and pieces of candidates that they agreed with, disagreed with, but they thought it was like their civic duty to vote for whoever like they most aligned with. but even that alignment might not be enough for them to say they felt heard and they felt completely represented in the election. More so, I want to participate and do my civic duty and to vote, even if I'm not 100% for every candidate or any candidate.
Okay. And what about you?
I think building off of Sophie, I think that, and to your question, I think voting is important for young people just because the people that are being elected into office and into these positions will very much be prevalent in our futures, and like as we grow up and like gain more authority in society. So I think that by voting and like giving younger voices the opportunity to be heard, like it allows for change not just to be made, but to also have a genuine impact on us.
Okay. Well, we've got just a few minutes left, and so I'm just going to go around and just get your final thoughts on what you've heard or the idea of being heard. And let's go to our experts first. I'm going to go to Alfonso. Final thoughts?
I mean, when I hear young people, it's like, it's refreshing. And the only thing I would say is, yeah, politics sometimes is voting, it's this higher level, and the sense of uselessness is there, but you're already doing things to change your environment, like the example of the use of artificial intelligence, or even talking to your family members, getting your camera, going out there, doing this campaign. So in that sense, I would say, like, especially now where the system seems to be so apart and so break and doesn't make much sense anywhere all around the world, I think there's an opportunity to try to generate an alternative to the future that we want, and in this case, you that have much more years, and try to do it locally and inspire others in the making, right? And I think that's also that's the concept of political action in a sense, and I think everybody can do that. So especially the young people that are committed to what they are seeing and want a different way, right? So yeah.
Okay. And Marwan, final thoughts?
Yeah, okay. So I think my final thoughts would be centered around political education, seizing this opportunity where there's a lot of people from this generation, Gen Z, going out to the street and protest, and seizing this opportunity to educate themselves and also share the knowledge with each other. I think it's also, I would like to highlight something else. I think there should be some type of intergenerational recognition, Gen Z communication with other generations, understanding, what other generations before them did wrong, and, what they could learn from their experiences. This also goes in line with the idea of like a collective memory that goes down from these different social political movements. How like protesters in 2011 can teach protesters in 2025 in Morocco about how to bring about change. Um, yeah, I'd say those two things, and keep focusing on the conditions that created this Gen Z protests, which I would say are unemployment, global unemployment in the global South, specifically in countries of the global South. And climate change, I think that's also something that's very important, that's uniting all the young people today, because the world we're going to live in today, in the future, is very uncertain. And it just, since I said this word uncertain, I think it's all going to be summarized in, young people are afraid of the uncertain future or uncertainty of the future. That's why there is all this like anger and people going out to the streets and protesting, because people want some stability, some certainty.
Okay. Mahi, final thoughts?
About the getting hurt, yes, it is something we should give a thought upon. And I feel there is a generation gap which I experience in my parents or their generation and in my generation, that here we question why. Why is it things like that way? Be it superstition or be it anything. I always like to question it, like, why is it like this? And they probably mishear it and consider it as back answering or disrespect. But yeah, I do make myself clear that yes, it's not a back answer, but I'm pretty curious to know why some things have to be followed the same way. And if it's, you know, if it's for a good reason, why not? I shall also follow the same. And about the politics, yes, people should be involved in politics so that they know what's going around them, and they should be, into more in on their country. And yes, general science and general knowledge is as important as the academics, because it will make you more active and you will actually know what's your condition of your country and what role do you play as a youth, as young voters or young voices, that what role you should play in the future to improve this condition instead of deteriorating it. So yes, I would also highlight that point, and we all should, self-realize some aspects that yes, there are many awareness camps and people saying and teachers almost saying and parents saying, all generations saying that yes, things are happening, you should take. But what I really feel is self-realization plays a major role here, because as long as you don't self-realize something, you won't do that thing. So self-realization and involving yourself in different things which are important, that plays a major role. And I would like all of my peers to self-realize and look into yourself instead of, telling people their mistakes. But yes, you should correct yourself, and by looking at you, maybe some or the other one may get inspired and the chain goes on. So yes, I would like to give this the solution which I feel what I have thought about. So yeah.
Great. And now we're going to go back to Sophie and Sydney. Final thoughts?
I think Mahi said it really well. It's really about the idea of whether you're heard or not. It's about self-realization and looking within to understand not only how like we as Gen Z and as young adults and young women can be receptive to listening, but also know when it's the right time to push and really advocate for ourselves to be heard.
I agree.
Okay. No final thoughts?
No, I just like agree with everything Sophie said. Like she took it forward.
Okay. Okay. And finally, we're going to give the last words to Ramona and Anna. Final thoughts?
Okay, so yeah, I really agree with what was said. And just to add on that, I think like I feel like being curious is something that's really important. So when we're talking about like us as youth, trying to give our what we're trying to say to the adults, let's say. So you should just try to like be curious and like just learn where they're coming from, and to just speak in a way that like I feel like you shouldn't try to convey what you're trying to say, like filled with like so much negative emotions, because I also feel like it's gonna be hard for the other party to like try and understand what you're saying if you're speaking with so much like anger or that. So I feel like calming down is something that's really important, and just trying to state the facts and like speaking for them to understand and not speaking to like attack the other party. Yeah. Yeah.
And final thoughts?
Just similar to what Ramona said, not letting your emotions cloud cloud your conversations with the other party, and just listening and understanding, and then you can, through that, you hopefully can make change and get something out of the conversation. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I so appreciate all of our panelists, our students, and our experts who've come taken this hour out of their time and all the preparation that took to get here. And we're going to have this posted on News Decoder and our social media, and hopefully we will get the conversation about conversations continuing. Thank you so much. And have a good day for those of you that you're just starting your mornings, and good night for the rest of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.